No.
In this video, we'll give you the top waiver wire players to target along with our reaction to the week 1 action. We are Jim Coventry and Anthony Cervino of RotoWire. You can catch Anthony on the X at The Real NFL Guru. And you can find me over at Jim Coventry NFL. Anthony, we're going to start out with waivers here. Waivers, hot and heavy. I think there's a little bit more interesting than many other week 1s. But at quarterback, there's never really a lot in early on. But if you're in a 2 quarterback mandatory league, Jordan Love is going to miss time. As of this point, it seems unlikely they're going to sign a new quarterback because by the time they get him up to speed, Jordan Love will probably be coming back. So we're probably looking at Malik Willis or Sean Clifford. I think it's a disaster either way, but if you're in a 2 quarterback league and you have to have a body in there, it would seem Malik Willis is a bit ahead because he went in. Any quick thoughts on which one you would pick up if you were under that pressure to add one?
I think the early lean would be Malik Willis because he could potentially bring somewhat of a rushing floor.
Yeah, and that's about it. Again, if you're desperate, that would be the way to go. 2 quarterback mandatory league. Other than that, they are not startable. And on a side note, we'll talk about this later. This may tank the Packers offense for a while, but we'll get to that later. Running backs. If you're in a shallow league, I know he was drafted in a lot of leagues, but I got to bring it up. J.K. Dobbins could be available in shorter leagues, smaller leagues. In week 1, Dobbins goes 10 carries for $135 and a touchdown, breaks a 60-yard run, had another explosive run, scores a touchdown. Gus Edwards just goes 11 for 26. Kimani Vidal was inactive. Look, Dobbins outsnapped Edwards, and I think this could be the trend going forward based on the way they look, Anthony.
Yeah, J.K. Dobbins should be the guy moving forward. He's always been the more elusive runner, and there's no learning curve, right? Because I know Edwards and Dobbins both were with Roman, but like Dobbins, we've always held to a high regard in fantasy football. And if we finally get that healthy season out of him, he could potentially be a league winner because he's gone undrafted in a lot of leagues. And if you drafted him, he was a 12th round pick more times than not.
Yeah, Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is next. Now, Bucky Irving handles 9 carries for 62 yards. He catches a pair of passes. He may have done enough to cut into Rachaad White's workload. Now, White had a bigger workload. He had 15 carries. He had receptions. He was huge as a receiver in this game, 75 yards through the air. But Bucky Irving played well enough, and it was a cake matchup for both running backs. But as a runner, Irving looked much more effective than White because White's the better pass catcher. But can Irving cut into this workload, Anthony?
Yeah, I do think there's a world where Bucky Irving comes out and cuts into this workload. I was big on drafting Bucky Irving because of how efficient he was at the collegiate level. And in his first NFL action in regular season time, he has proven that he's still efficient, and he's more efficient than Rachaad White. Let's face it, Rachaad White last season, he was one of the more inefficient backs in the NFL despite his workload.
Yeah, so again, if you need that depth at running back, Bucky Irving is worth a whirl. I do think White remains the primary pass catcher because he is very, very good at that. Alexander Mattison of the Las Vegas Raiders is next. Mattison gets 5 carries and 6 targets. The game was close to late in the third quarter, and then the Chargers started to pull away. But Mattison had already done his damage through the air on like a 31-yard touchdown pass. And it looks to me like if the Raiders are going to be trailing, though, Madison's probably going to be the hurry-up back. Dylan Laube was inactive. I think Madison's still going to be mixed in anyway. I think Mattison is a factor in this backfield, and with the PPR element, he could have a little more value than we expected. Anthony?
Yeah, this was one of the more surprising ones. There was always that rumor that, hey, if Zamir White struggles the first few weeks, they're going to try other things. They tried other things quick, and Alexander Mattison looked like the better back yesterday. So there's a high level of panic for me when it comes to Zamir White and what he is moving forward.
But again, if you're in that PPR league and you need a running back, investing in Mattison might be a good speculative ad at this point. Tank Bigsby. He was horrible last year. No questions asked. They tried to make him a thing early, and then they realized he was not very good. Well, the team talked him up in camp. Well, he matches Travis Etienne, 12 carries to 12 carries, competitive game throughout against the Dolphins. But unlike last year, Bigsby goes for 6 yards a pop. And we know since the 2 years that Etienne's been playing under this coaching staff, they want to limit his work. He got ETN after last year's bye went down to 12.9 carries per game after that bye. If Bigsby plays well, he will get rushing attempts every week. Anthony?
Yeah, this should be alarming if you're a fantasy football manager of Travis Etienne. We know that Doug Peterson historically likes to use multiple backs. He just didn't have the personnel to do so. Now it looks like Tank Bigsby has taken a step forward. He looked efficient, 12 for 73, as you said. Nothing as a receiver, but if you need a running back to stash, and he might even have standalone value, Tank Bigsby should be atop of your list.
The next one, look, if we talk about week 1 usage and back to the Ravens, Justice Hill is going to be the receiving back here. Derrick Henry's not. He was off the field. Hill outsnapped Henry in this game. Hill played 54% of the snaps, 8 targets. And because really there's no real downfield threat, people can say Rashad Bateman all day long. No defense worries about Rashad Bateman. So basically, the screen passes to Hill are going to be a real thing. He catches 6 for 52. Now, the Ravens, if they're going to be winning games, Justice Hill may not be as involved if they're leading games, but in any game that's close or trailing or defense, they're just looking to take away certain things. Hill could be involved in the PPR method. Thoughts, Anthony?
Yeah, Justice Hill didn't provide anything at all as a runner. I think that is going to be reserved for Derrick Henry, but we also know historically, Derrick Henry has not been terribly involved in his career as a receiver out of the backfield. And right out the gate, we saw Justice Hill in that role. And I think he holds on to that at least until maybe Keaton Mitchell comes back.
Now, the next one is Ty Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings. This may have been game script. Aaron Jones was the clear lead back here, but because they were blowing out the Giants, Chandler gets 8 carries and 3 targets. This is a deeper ad because it really looks like Jones fits that offense extremely well. Chandler will get some work every week, but I don't know how high the volume will be because I don't know how many weeks Minnesota's coming out and spanking an opponent down like they did to the Giants. Thoughts on Chandler?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of standalone value here, right? This is a contingent waiver wire ad where Chandler's value is contingent on a potential injury to Aaron Jones or another blowout type of a situation. So he's Chandler's on the lower part of my waiver wire list.
Now, Jamal Williams of the Saints, we're digging deeper and deeper and deeper, obviously, as we go here. But Williams was washed last year, but now first game, and it was a cake matchup. Carolina did nothing right in that game. Like, you can't find a single thing they did well. But Williams goes 12 touches, 51 yards. Much better than he looked last year. Alvin Kamara is unlikely to see a full workload. He's 29, a lot of tread on the tires. I know that we had Taysom Hill involved as well, but Williams handled volume here. And I do think that he could continue to see volume. And the thing is, though, New Orleans is not going to win many games in blowout fashion. And unless they're going to get Williams involved as a receiver, that's going to be real dicey. So it might be week to week, but at least Williams looked better than he did last year. Anthony?
Yeah, Jamal Williams was solid yesterday. It was just one of those weird type of games. I don't believe this is the real identity of the Saints. Jamal Williams, only 1 reception, only 1 target. So he's really still that one-trick pony. I'm adding him because of the Alvin Kamara age and potential injury situation, but this isn't somebody that I can count on in my starting lineups. He has Philly, Dallas, Atlanta next. 2 out of the 3 with Dallas and Atlanta are tough matchups. Maybe you can use him if you're in a bind against Philly.
All right, and again, just digging the deepest of deep, we know that Jonathan Brooks is expected back at some point after his 4-week IR stint, but Miles Sanders did get 5 rushes and 2 targets, while Chuba Hubbard only had 6 carries. Hubbard did not look good. Last year, he had volume. He looked decent. He did not look good. Sanders obviously didn't look great, but he looked better than Hubbard. Again, if you're scraping the barrel and you've got to have a body in there until Brooks gets back, Sanders could get a few carries each week. Anthony?
Yeah, I don't love this Carolina Panthers situation. And if this is what we're going to get out of Bryce Young, the enemy defense has no reason to honor the run. They're going to stack the line, and that spells trouble for any of these running backs. You know, if Miles Sanders somehow gets some pass catching opportunities, I think he's worth playing. Otherwise, like you said, he's really just a body on what could be the worst team in the NFL.
We'll move the wide receiver now. So moving to a different segment here. I have him in all my leagues pretty much, but I checked Yahoo and he's 10% rostered. So I'm bringing up my number 1 is Wan'Dale Robinson. targeted 12 times, catching 6 for 44 yards against the Vikings. He and Malik Neighbors saw all the vibes. Right now, all the targets. Right now, I have to say, 1 week, you can't take the whole season away from that. The Giants look awful. They could not compete with the Vikings. So they're going to have to throw, and they're going to have to throw short passes a lot. And Wan'Dale Robinson is that. So I think the volume's going to be there all year. Anthony?
Yeah, Wan'Dale play, and this is a player that we were both on, you more so this offseason. And there's a lot of vacated targets, right, in that Giants offense. We look at Saquon Barkley and the tight end position being in flux. Wan'Dale's in the slot, and he's going to be a big benefit because they're all not going to go to Neighbors. The defense is going to focus on Neighbors, and I think we're going to see a lot of similar target shares going in Wan'Dale's direction. He's going to be a high floor player on a week-to-week basis.
You know who I forgot to put in my notes for this, and I should have, because I don't think in shallow leagues, I don't think he's going to be all that high rostered. But I do think if you're in a situation, Greg Dortch, if he's available, Greg Dortch is the third receiver in this offense. We saw yesterday he had 6 catches for 47 yards. When he has played in his short career and they put him on the field, he has mostly been productive. So I actually, he probably would go right there with Wan'Dale Robinson, but Dortch will be a factor here. That defense is terrible in Arizona. They're going to have to score points and throw the ball. So Dortch is going to be a factor in PPR leagues. I like him a lot. Anthony?
Yeah, Dortch had 8 targets. He was the second most targeted player on this team next to McBride. He had 1 less target than McBride. Meanwhile, the quote-unquote starting receivers, Harrison, 3 targets, Wilson, 2 targets, holding a touchdown. But right now, it looks like Dortch might be the receiver you want to target in waivers if you want a piece of this Arizona offense that should be throwing a ton moving forward.
This next player will only have relevance if we find out that Puka Nacua is going to miss time. The fact he was ruled out of the Sunday night game, that usually spells the possibility of at least a missed game. But look, I learned my lesson with Nacua, Demarcus Robinson, Kyron Williams. If Sean McVay puts somebody on the field, they are going to produce. Don't even care who they are. Tyler Johnson. He was drafted in the NFL 4 years ago, hasn't done anything. 5 catches, 79 yards on 7 targets, coming in when Nacua went out, and that was what Puka Nacua would have done in that game. So I don't think it matters who's in that lineup as long as Sean McVay likes him and you know what he's doing. So if Nacua misses time, what do you think about Tyler Johnson?
I like Tyler Johnson. The other one I'm on is Demarcus Robinson, who you mentioned. I think you should be adding both of these players if they're available in your league. Let's say if Demarcus Robinson is already rostered, then maybe take a shot on Tyler Johnson because there's a lot of value in this McVay passing attack.
What I did notice was Demarcus Robinson retained the same type of role he had last year. We talked about the 4 passes, the yardage was, he didn't score a touchdown like he did last year, but it was funny because Johnson did move into what Nacua would have done. So you're right. Both are definitely players you want to look at. Just very, very interesting how Sean McVay just is an amazing genius. Devon Vele is next. 7th round pick from the Broncos. Some people in deeper leagues had actually drafted, really deep leagues had drafted him. And I'm like, wow, you're really going to make this move? He had a strong training camp. He catches all 8 targets, only 39 yards. But if it's PPR, it's 11.9 points for somebody who's very, very deep. Again, if you're in a regular 12-team league with a short bench, you're not probably rostering him. But he's going to be in 3 receiver sets for this team. And they're probably not going to be very good. And they're probably going to trail. And they're going to throw short. Thoughts on Vele?
Yeah, he had the 3rd most snap opportunities on the team. And if you're somebody rostering Marvin Mims, per se, who was drafted in a lot of leagues, Marvin Mims only played in 12 offensive snaps. He only had 1 target. I think I would be very, very much willing to drop Mims and pick up Vele.
So next, Rashad Bateman. Bateman plays 84% of the snaps, targeted 5 times. A lot of that came late, fine. Caught 2 passes for 53 yards. Got the downfield pass, great. But John Harbaugh wasn't lying in the offseason. Said that Bateman's going to be the clear number 2. I don't know what that means week to week, but Bateman is going to be a full-time player. If you're in a deeper league, we haven't been happy with last year's results. But in his first 2 years when he was healthy, he looked decent. Thoughts on Bateman?
62 offensive snaps, 2nd most, 3 behind Zay Flowers. The next receiver at the snaps on the Ravens, 26 for Nelson Aguilar. So Bateman is the clear-cut number 2 wide receiver, but he only had 5 targets. 2 receptions, 53 yards. Now, my question is with adding Rashad Bateman, is Isaiah Likely the number 2 wide receiver on this team? There was reports coming into the season that he would be used as a quote unquote wide receiver 2 in a joker role. So that is my hiccup here with Bateman, that Likely really could be that guy.
Well, when we cover tight ends, I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant here. Get ready for that. I see Jamie and Charlene are in the house. Appreciate you both. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Look, Quentin Johnson is what it is. He's on the field. DJ Chark's on the IR, so Johnson's going to be playing in those 3 receiver sets for sure. He did catch 3 of 5 targets for 38 yards. Wasn't the worst game in the world. Raiders defense is decent. I don't think Johnson's going to be a star, but if you're in a deeper league, he's going to see volume. Although the defense for the Chargers looked good against the Raiders, against most teams, that's not a good defense. Thoughts on Quentin Johnston?
Yeah, he kind of came out of nowhere because especially somebody like me, I wrote this guy off last season when he couldn't get on the field, and when he did get on the field, really didn't do much. I don't have a lot of interest in Quentin Johnson, even with no DJ Chark. Josh Palmer seemed to be the odd man out, possibly could have because of coverage. He only had 4 targets, but led all Chargers wide receivers in snaps. I think I'd be more willing to shy away from Quentin Johnston because I don't know how long this lasts.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Again, there's the wide receiver pool this week is not great, but again, there's some good names. The last one, you got to be in a deeper league. And actually, in my deeper leagues, I roster like 14-team leagues with fairly decent benches. End of my bench was Ray McCloud, and people laughed at me. Ray McCloud, seriously. He's the number 3 in Atlanta. Atlanta is going to run 3 receiver sets. Now, McCloud played a little more than half the snaps, but there are weeks he'll play more than that. And that Pittsburgh matchup was brutal for everybody. But McCloud goes in. He led Drake London. He led Darnell Mooney. It was 4 catches, 52 yards on 7 targets. And he made a really acrobatic catch on a play that Kirk Cousins was hit, getting up into the air and grabbing this ball that could have been picked off. McCloud showed flashes with the 49ers. He's not a great player, but in a 3 receiver set that's going to pass, and you're in a deep league, he could get you a couple receptions each week. Anthony?
Yeah, I don't hate the Ray McCloud addition. There were reports that he had a leg up on Rondale Moore anyway. And, obviously no Rondale Moore. He's done for the year. Why not, right? Like, we don't know what we're going to get out of this Atlanta Falcons defense. There could be times where they have to throw a lot, and there could be some volume. Like Kirk Cousins yesterday, only 26 pass attempts. I don't think that's going to be the norm. I think it's going to be a higher volume throwing team, and there will be opportunities going in McLeod's direction moving forward.
All right, we are going to move to the next segment, which is tight ends, and stay tuned because after tight ends, we're going to do some reactions to week 1. All right, tight ends. I'm going to go on my rant here. I have to do this. Got to get done. Look, for fantasy, if you had Isaiah Likely, beautiful. The Ravens, they are outside their mind. And you're going to say, what am I talking about? The Ravens, I knew that they were talking about it. I'm thinking they can't be serious because they have 3 new offensive linemen on their team. Patrick Ricard normally plays about 57% of the snaps last year. He's a fullback, but he goes in and he blocks. He helps the line. And instead, they played him in about 27% of the snaps, and Likely was on the field all day. So what does the defense do? Oh, all right, they got Mark Andrews and they got Likely. Well, those guys ain't blocking. Those 3 new offensive linemen, they can't block. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to stuff the run, and we're going to make Lamar Jackson really, really uncomfortable. So for fantasy, it was beautiful. Oh, yeah, well, Lamar Jackson has no choice. I either run myself, I throw it to Isaiah Likely, who's open short, because I can't throw downfield because the line can't protect, and because of Likely on the field, I'm not getting any help from my tight end, so I can't throw downfield to Andrews. I can't have a downfield passing attack, so my whole offense is discombobulated. And fans of the Ravens will say, well, they almost won. It was garbage time. I know it was only 7 points, and they almost won. But it wasn't because of what they did. They went in with a game plan. For fantasy, it's beautiful. Roster Isaiah Likely. I don't think he gets 12 targets and 2 for Mark Andrews every week. But the point is, if the Ravens keep Likely on the field, their season's tanked because they are not going to protect their quarterback, and they are going to not move the ball with regularity. I'm done with my rant. The point is, Isaiah Likely is your number 1 waiver wire ad of the week.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You have to add Isaiah Likely. You bring up a lot of good points, but nobody's going to deny when Isaiah Likely does get playing time, whether it's, whether Mark Andrews is in or out of the lineup, he produces and he has a rapport with Lamar Jackson, I think there's a world where both Andrews and Likely can coexist, but I do think the target volume will shift back into Mark Andrews. Thursday Night Football, if you watch, I think both defenses we're going to say, okay, we're going to take out Andrews, we're going to take out Kelsey, let your ancillary guys beat us, and that's the type of game that was. But I don't think that people should be panicking on Mark Andrews right now.
Exactly correct. The good news is they threw the ball to the tight end a ton. And Mark Andrews is still a superstar in the league. So that's it. They're different. Andrews is a seam stretcher and Likely's the catch and run guy.
12 targets. What if the next week we're going to take out Likely, then Mark Andrews is going to be the guy. So this is not a time to panic. Don't go and sell Mark Andrews cheap. They'll be fine.
Yes. All right. Next tight end. Colby Parkinson of the Rams. Tyler Higbee, look, he got the injury to his knee in the NFC wildcard game. I don't know when he's coming back. With the surgery, 9-month fastest recovery, you're looking maybe November. Colby Parkinson caught 4 passes, 47 yards on 5 targets. The Rams don't always feature the tight end, but they use him enough. And so he's probably not going to hit the top 12, but Colby Parkinson could be right outside of that while he's starting. Quick thoughts there?
Yeah, they signed him to a 3-year, $22.5 million contract, right? He's going to be the guy while Higbee is out. And remember, Higbee was always one of the more fantasy productive tight ends. We already saw 5 targets going into Parkinson's direction, 4 for 47 caught, 8.7 PPR points. That's double-digit points in a tight end premium league. You could do a lot worse than rostering Parkinson. And in those favorable tight end matchups, he could be a week winner. There's going to be some spike weeks.
Now, the next player is very interesting. Tucker Kraft plays 96% of the snaps to 25% for Luke Musgrave. I assume Kraft was the blocker, Musgrave was the receiver, but they didn't play 2 tight ends a lot. That's unlike Green Bay, but Kraft was the guy. Now, the targets were about the same, 3 for Kraft and 2 for Musgrave. But if Kraft is playing 96% of the snaps, then that means you've got to move him ahead of Musgrave in your rankings. But now, for the short term, if there's no Jordan Love, I worry there's no production at all in this offense. So Kraft may be better when Love's on the field, but right now I'm downgrading both tight ends, but Kraft is the one to roster. Anthony?
Yeah, I agree that the snap count usually dictates who you want. And Kraft, and it surprised me because both are good tight ends, but I thought this was Musgrave's job, and that's just not the case after 1 week. Now, you bring up a good point about how do we handle this without Jordan Love. I would go pick up Colby Parkinson over Kraft this week because, without Jordan Love, we know who Malik Willis is, and it did not look good. He couldn't even, make that Titans roster over Mason Rudolph. So it's going to be a mess in Green Bay for a little bit. Expect a lot of Josh Jacobs.
All right, let's do 2 more here. Mike Gesicki targeted 4 times. He did catch a touchdown. Replay somehow figured out he didn't hang on to it. I kind of thought he did, but must not have. Anyway, he was using the red zone. I know there was no T. Higgins. I know Jamar Chase is working his way back, but Gesicki could be a factor here. I do think if you're going outside the top 15 tight ends, I think Gesicki could place right around there. Anthony?
Yeah, Gesicki's one of my most rostered players in fantasy football. I was taking him everywhere. I like the potential in the big slot role. I think Tanner Hudson, he fumbled. He had a nice catch, fumbled on the goal line, big turnover in that game. So maybe that takes him out of the rotation a little bit more. But, you mentioned that Gesicki touchdown. I had a betting ticket on that, plus 400 odds. I was saying some not happy things when that got taken back. But, yeah, we should definitely be rostering Gesicki. I would roster him over Green Bay Packers tight ends right now.
All right, last one. We're not sure the statuses of this moment of Jake Ferguson's knee, but if Ferguson misses time, Luke Schoonmaker is going to move into a prominent role, and we know this. Dak Prescott loves his tight end. Schoonmaker and limited targets last year was effective. I think that if you're in a pinch, and Schoonmaker could be a top 12 tight end if Ferguson's out, because just the way Dallas used the tight end. Anything there, Anthony?
Now, there is a report that literally just came out a few minutes ago that tests revealed an MCL sprain for Ferguson, which means he's going to miss time. Rappaport further says it's a bone bruise and an MCL sprain. So Ferguson's week to week. So big bullet dodge. But this tight end position in Dallas, We know it's extremely valuable. Dak loves it, no matter who it was. Witten, Blake Jarwin, Schultz, Ferguson, now Schoonmaker. You got to pick up Schoonmaker. Absolutely. There's good, and it gets the Saints this week.
Yes. If you enjoy videos like this, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel on YouTube. Also, you can check out all of our fantasy football content and rankings. You can get a free 2-day trial, no credit card needed. Head to rotowire.com/Jim. You can check out all of our content. Before we get to the reactions, we're going to do a lightning round through some of these comments that are up here. Good people hanging with us today. Anthony, first question is thoughts about DK Metcalf as a bust this year. I don't see it that way. What do you see?
I was worried about DK more so because of JSN. I'm high on JSN, and I think they could be extremely close when it comes to fantasy finish. So I was fading DK in favor of JSN, but yesterday I was not happy with either one of them.
Tyler Lockett, who was coming in hurt, he's the only receiver that produced for them. I have to rewatch that game film because I was watching multiple games and writing an article at the same time. I wonder how much Patrick Surtain ended up on Metcalf. And if that was the case, that would explain that one away because Surtain, when he's playing well, is really a top 5 corner. If that happened, I'm not worried. I'm going to be watching the tape today and tomorrow, so I'll let you know on that as well. Charlene, Jaden Daniels. Yeah, Jaden Daniels looked great. Jaden Daniels, I'm going to talk about him. We're going to talk about him later, so we'll table that for a minute. Dalton Kincaid, it was a very rough game for him yesterday. No Matt Milano wrong side of the hair. They're playing Arizona, who can't cover anybody, and yet no receiver went off in any way. Are we worried about Kincaid?
A little bit, right? Because we were drafting Dalton Kincaid as a top 5 tight end off the board, and it's not only a Kincaid thing. Like, they weren't throwing a lot, and we're seeing more of that Brady offense from last year where they really turned into a running show. And if there's not volume there and they're going to spread the ball around the way they did, this could be dooming for people who drafted Kincaid. I do have a high level of panic after 1 week.
As I said in the preseason shows, and if you watch some of these videos, I talked about how there is no receiver on the Bills that scares any opposing defense. And I thought the defense would kind of pack it in a bit, crowd the interior for Josh Allen, knowing they're probably not going to get big passing plays. Josh Allen took a lot of big hits because there were so many bodies up closer where they normally would not have been that way in years past. And I think it took a toll on everybody. Josh Allen won the day. But it was Arizona. If that was a better defense, I'm really anxious to see how he's looking in that one, because if it wasn't Arizona, I don't know that he played Superman that game because he was taking a beating.
I mean,
all right.
And he got clipped with that hand injury. The Bills are saying they're not worried about it, but hey, he was already a little bit nicked up.
Man, week 1. Bryant left the Dallas D on the bench. The only thing I'll say about this is, the Raiders did have a good matchup, but man, Cleveland was down both tackles. There's no Nick Chubb, and they have a pass rush. So they just sometimes just look at things like that. Charlene points out a lot of surprises, but she also says relax. And you're right. We have to react every week, but we can't overreact. We have to react on everything, but be careful. Like when somebody superstars at a down game, think it through. Like, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 3 for 13 or whatever it was. That's not going to happen a lot.
Yeah.
So, players like that, you got to kind of let it go. You're saying something?
No, I was going to say, like, I feel like the first 2 weeks of the NFL season now that we're down to 3 preseason games and how little these starters play, like, they're in preseason mode.
And it was sloppy play over the weekend, very sloppy by many teams. And there were teams that were clearly not prepared for week 1. So that's a big factor of it. There are some things we take away and we move forward. And there are other things like, all right, we got to see a little more before we do that. Randy asked whether we stash Ray Davis or Braylon Allen. I did not like the fact Ty Johnson was used early in that game. Ray Davis did get a little bit of work later and looked certainly good in that. And I was really surprised they gave James Cook 19 carries. We said the last 5 games last year, he had 2.64 yards per carry, James Cook did. And to me, it was all because he was used so heavily. He's a back. You need to keep him explosive. They worked the heck out of him yesterday. Who do you stash, Davis or Ray Davis or Braylon Allen?
I'm going to still stash Ray Davis. James Cook, I don't know if I have the metrics, but he still wasn't scoring the football. I think I saw a stat coming into the year. He only has 4 rushing touchdowns on over 300 career carries. So eventually I do think James Cook or Ray Davis is going to take over that short yardage role.
Next, are we picking up Mike Williams now that he's going to be with the Jets? He's available, appears for week 1. Are we picking him up, or are we letting him sit on waivers?
I like Mike Williams. I think he's certainly worth stashing.
Brian asked about picking up Jacoby Myers or Xavier Worthy. So 2 things with Worthy. Worthy had 3 touches in the game. That toss sweep was perfectly blocked, and his speed was insane. I had goosebumps. Yeah. The speed was so electric, but the play was perfectly blocked. He didn't get touched on a play. He ran across the field and through traffic. That was beautiful. The touchdown was on a busted coverage. Marlon Humphrey tried to pass him off to nobody, and he passed him off to nobody. And Patrick Mahomes like, oh my gosh, you're standing there wide open. I think I'm going to throw you a touchdown pass. So look, Worthy's a very, very fast young man. Marquise Brown didn't play. Marquise Brown is going to command significant target share. Worthy can have big plays, and those are going to happen. We're going to have these weeks. I would take him over Jacoby Myers, though, because I don't really trust his Raiders passing attack. Anthony?
Yeah, same here. Over Jacoby Myers, yes. But Jim, do you agree that maybe the biggest buy low in fantasy football right now is Hollywood Brown?
100%.
I don't know if he's ever going to be cheaper because with people have that recency bias. They see Worthy scores 2 touchdowns. They don't see he only had 3 targets, only 4 total opportunities. And I do think the value of Hollywood right now, you'll never get him lower.
And Patrick Mahomes was having a real serious connection with Brown throughout practices. And they're a perfect match. The way that Brown can improvise plays, and that's exactly what Mahomes does. The nuance that Marquise Brown has, it could not be a better setup. Couple more here. Jamie points out the Kyren Williams. Look, I'm not a Kyren Williams guy. I thought that it was all system last year. I'm going to give him a pass last night. Rob Havenstein, the tackle, was out. Brian Avila, the interior lineman, got knocked out. They were missing Alaric Jackson, who had a suspension. That line was severely compromised. And Detroit was the best run defense in the league last year. So I will give Kyren Williams a passer. The good news, if you invest in Kyren Williams, Blake Corum got zipped. Ronnie Rivers was the number 2 and got a couple carries. So look, if you invested in Williams, he's getting volume, and what more do you want, right, Anthony?
Yeah, you're going to get the volume from Kyren. I was a little bit worried about Blake Corum, but after seeing last night, he not going to see the field, right? He's their kick returner. Meanwhile, Kyren Williams, only 14.4 PPR points, but he had 21 touches, 54 total yards, a touchdown, including 3 receptions. So this is why you drafted him in the 2nd round. And it's going to start looking up once these matchups get a little bit softer, starting with next week, Arizona.
And then a couple quick ones. Thoughts on George Kittle tonight? I'm a little concerned he's going to block more. Trent Williams is supposed to play every down, but he's back. And but that said, the Jets are a tough matchup. But if you drafted Kittle, you start him every time. Because you never know. If they use him, he can beat anybody. If you draft him, you're getting the up and down. Anthony, we're going to do one last one. I know I had a couple questions came in late, but we got to get back to our last segment, so I apologize to those I won't answer. There was a question about Tyler Johnson we covered earlier. We're saying if Nakua misses time, Sean McVay's proven that he will make that guy work. And clearly Johnson is playing in the Nakua spot. So yes, if Nakua misses time, then Tyler Johnson has real value. I guess 5-second answers on these. So we got to move forward. Last 2. Ramondre or ETN, Anthony?
Ooh, ETN.
And then Charlene, Gus or Dobbins? I think Dobbins passed him by. Gus is 29, and Gus is an ordinary back who had a lot of touchdowns last year. Dobbins looked like himself. And if Dobbins looks like himself, Dobbins is by a million miles a superior player. He just gets hurt all the time. So for right now, Dobbins, I think, has to be the guy. All right, some reactions. Anthony, Saquon Barkley. Oh, my goodness. So we know the whole setup. You got A.J. Brown, you got Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Jalen Hurts. No defense can come in and say, you know what, we're going to take everything away. You can't. There's too many of them. And we saw it. If you play to pass, Saquon Barkley's going to eat you alive, and he has a good line. He could go out on a route as a receiver. They can isolate him on a linebacker, catch a touchdown pass. Saquon Barkley. And the last thing I want to say, the tush push, Jason Kelce is very much missed. They did not get the leverage on those, and that is good for Saquon Barkley because when they're at the goal line, I think they're already realizing we're not going to have that advantage, but we have Saquon Barkley who could just run the ball in. So, and that might preserve Jalen Hurts. Thoughts on Barkley and the Philly offense?
I took a lot of heat when I said, hey, Saquon Barkley could have one of those magic CMC seasons, a lot of parallels between their careers, and right out the gate, Saquon Barkley took over the football game, looked like the best player on the field, and really looked like the player that the Giants thought that they drafted. When you put this many players and skill position players and the quarterback and the offensive line, and then you have a generational talent like Saquon Barkley, big things are going to happen. People say they're not going to throw to their running back. Saquon Barkley, looked terrific on his first touchdown. And then, he's just making plays everywhere, scoring touchdowns. I'm not going to say he's going to get 3 touchdowns every week, but he could be, like, you drafted Saquon a lot of times in the second round. He's a potential big time league winner.
And I think overall, the Philly offense is lethal because you got to pick your poison, and you're not winning. Because we saw Kellen Moore already. Kellen Moore saw what the defense was doing, and he just knew exactly what buttons to push. And they may not be good at defense, which is good because they're going to have to score points every week. And that's going to be crazy. Jordan Love's next one. We're going to move to our next point here, Anthony. Jordan Love, missing 3 weeks, maybe 4, knee injury, sprained MCL. My question is this. As we look at that offense now, last year, when Jordan Love was working his way in, it took him 9 weeks to figure out the offense, and they were not a good offense for 9 weeks. They had a couple of garbage time weeks. Matt LaFleur finally figured it out, pieced it together, found the strengths of the players. Well, now you're going to put in really a horrible quarterback, Malik Willis or Sean Clifford. I think this offense is going to struggle to move the ball. I think defense are going to load the box against whoever that quarterback is. I think they're going to jam up receivers. I think the quarterbacks are going to struggle to find. I think that every Packers player should be downgraded with the one exception. It's possible they can use enough gadget plays for Jaden Reed. Use him as a runner and screens. Jaden Reed might be the one who could retain some value, but I'm really concerned about everybody else. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, if you have Packers assets, and I'll be with you right here with the Jaden Reed. Outside of Jaden Reed and Josh Jacobs, you got to put him on your bench, at least for the first week. Maybe LaFleur's a genius, can somehow figure it out with Clifford or primarily Malik Willis, but you cannot take the risk. And this is a nice matchup, right? Like, Indy got torched by Stroud, and it's probably going to be a shootout, you would think, or Indy's going to score points. You would think Green Bay has to throw. I don't care. I cannot confidently start Green Bay wide receivers. Obviously, you're putting Josh Jacobs out there because he should see a ton of volume. He had 16 rushing attempts, 2 receptions. He could see, close to 30 touches this week. That would not shock me.
I want to point some out about Josh Jacobs. It was very clear in the first half of that game, the Eagles were playing the run. And Josh Jacobs had like 0.4 yards per carry. He was horrible. In the second half, you could tell very clearly the Eagles came out to defend the pass. And Josh Jacobs had a lot of room and he ran. If Jordan Love's not there, there's no defense playing the pass against them. If we see the Josh Jacobs in the first half against the Eagles, that could be a real problem. I'm still convinced. Last year, Josh Jacobs was a 40th percentile broken tackle rate guy. Yards after contact, I believe, were 32nd. He was not good, not a good running back. And if he's still not a good running back and teams are going to now make him the focal point because there's no quarterback, he might get volume. But at some point, they might just say, you know what? We're going to give somebody else the ball, too, because we're not going anywhere. Anything to that, Anthony?
I was out on Josh Jacobs during draft season. And obviously, everybody's dunking on me on Saturday morning after this game. But I said,
shouldn't have been.
Yeah, I hope maybe they figure it out with Josh Jacobs, but I just don't trust him.
No. All right. The next storyline we're going to cover, the Jaguars were very, very unimpressive on offense. Now, in their defense, they could have won the game. Travis Etienne's running to the end zone. Maybe he comes up a little bit short. Maybe Javon Holland punches the ball out. Miami picks it up. Miami wins the game. That would have been the nail, probably. That would have done it. But that said, Trevor Lawrence, 12 of 21, $162, facing a Miami defense with a lot of turnover, people coming back from injuries, a new coaching staff. I did not see that coming. If you were going to tell me Gabe Davis was the leading receiver at 62 yards and the combination of Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas, and Evan Ingram only had 20 more yards combined than Gabe Davis, I would have said you're outside your mind. Etienne on the ground, less than 4 yards per carry. And this is, again, a Miami defense that lost a lot of infrastructure. They lost major parts of their run defense in the offseason. And somehow they scored points early. But this offense was incorrect. Now, I'd like to blame it on week one, but we did not like the offense last year. And I'm thinking this is a very significant problem we might be dealing with, Anthony.
Yeah, there's a panic meter set for Jacksonville right now. Not only ETN splitting the carries with Bigsby, but these wide receivers, right? Like, yeah, Brian Thomas might have scored the touchdown, maybe led. I think he was second to Gabe Davis in yards, but like Christian Kirk was invisible. I think they all had roughly 4 targets each. I don't even know where Evan Ingram was. 21 pass attempts for Trevor Lawrence. I don't even know what to say about Jacksonville right now. But like this Miami game, like if there's a game for an offense to come together in a potential shootout and pop, it should have been this one. You get the season started right. It couldn't have gotten started any more wrong for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, I am very, very nervous right now. I did invest in Christian Kirk, and Kirk, like, he didn't fully run a route out that was an out play. There's another one where he didn't like secure the ball. So Kirk could have done a little bit better than he did. He only caught a pass for 30 yards. He's the one player I was invested in this offense. Again, I don't know that we're going to see a big breakout from this offense, but hopefully it's better than what it was, because it was a disaster in week one. The Houston Texans are the next story. They came in that they got their 3 receivers, and I talked about this in the preseason. They got rid of all 3 of their fullbacks, and last year they were one of the heaviest 21 personnel teams. That means they had a fullback, a running back, and they would force teams to play an extra body in the box, and then they would throw over the top because defenses had to respect the run. Even though they couldn't run, they kept running. Well, now they got their receivers, and defenses have to fear Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell. And my goodness, Joe Mixon goes bananas. A balanced offense. I mean, they actually ran more than they passed in this game. And Mixon goes for $159 and a touchdown, catches a few passes, and he just had the space. It was consistent chunks of yardage. And in the passing game, they did enough. Well, let's talk about Mixon first. Now I want to talk about the receivers. We'll split this into 2. Go ahead.
Joe Mixon, fantasy football wise, he was a hard player for me to evaluate. But the way they used him yesterday and the production he gave us, I wish I had more of Joe Mixon, Nick, because he's given the Houston Texans everything they wish they had last year out of their running back room. I don't think there's a chance that, barring injury, Mixon lose touches to somebody like Cam Akers or Damian Pierce. So it is full steam ahead with Joe Mixon in fantasy football.
The receivers, it was a spread out idea. Nico Collins got 8 targets. Tank Dell got 7. Stephon Diggs got 6. Stephon Diggs at the red zone love, only 33 yards, but 2 touchdowns. Nico Collins was their Superman Alpha, 117 yards, catching 6 of those 8 targets. Tank Dell didn't have the day we'd like. 3 catches, 40 yards on 7 targets. He did run twice for 19 yards, helped his fantasy day a bit. From what I saw in week one, I think they're going to do their best to keep all of them involved. And I think, although they'll all have good season stat lines, I still think Collins is a cut above the other 2, and I think he'll be fine. I think it's going to be very hard to predict week to week if any of those particular guys go off. What are your thoughts there?
When it comes to wide receiver position, Nico Collins was getting drafted the most. He's the one I am most bought into and most rostered on my fantasy football teams. And right out the gate, outside of the 2 touchdowns of Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins picked up where he left off last year as a dominant NFL wide receiver. So if there's anyone I trust in this group, I'm going to continue to trust Nico Collins. My bigger concern is scaling back to Mixon here. Mixon had 30 carries, and this was my take on why I was a little bit worried about C.J. Stroud coming into this season, because I believe they were going to run the football more because of what Mixon brings. So, having all three of these wide receivers, I think the one is Nico Collins, and who knows if Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs, they continue to get 6 and 7 targets. I think one of these guys on a week-to-week basis can potentially be a big-time disappointment.
Yeah, it's the numbers on the season may be fine, but it's gonna be a white knuckle ride, I think, here, because it's gonna be very tough to handicap week to week. Were you saying something else, Anthony?
I was like, even Diggs, he had 6 receptions, but only 33 yards. Like, outside of those touchdowns, Diggs did not have a good day.
Right, exactly. So we'll see what happens there. But again, Houston as a whole, running the ball too. Oh my goodness, they're gonna be fun. They're gonna score some points.
Yep.
All is well in Big D. Our next
Mm.
storyline. Dak got paid before the game yesterday. CD got paid a couple weeks ago. And a team that I thought had bad offseason vibes, man, money cures all ills, I guess. Maybe not for me because I don't have it, but it cures ills for them because they came out. And this is a Cleveland defense playing at home that you thought Dallas, a brand new left tackle, a brand new center. Their right tackle, Terrence Steele, in my mind, is a terrible pass protector. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Cleveland is going to just storm them. Dallas struggles to run. Well, didn't happen that way. Dallas blows them out. Now, their defense helped certainly, and they didn't give Cleveland an ounce to breathe. But we talked about this, Anthony. People here are talking about Rico Dowdle. He got his 8 carries, 26 yards. Zeke Elliott gets the goal line carry, like we said, got his 2 targets, only 9 yards. But he also turned his 10 carries into 40 yards. Even if Dowdle were to get more carries than Elliott, I said Elliott's going to get the more important fantasy touches. And so overall, Elliott's not going to be a superstar for fantasy, but if you use him as a flex, I think that he could get like double-digit touchdowns. He could catch 40 passes, and that's useful. Thoughts?
Yeah, you know how I feel about number 1 Ezekiel Elliott. Everybody says he's washed. I don't know if he's washed, but he's not the same guy as he was years ago. Certainly last year in New England, everybody looked washed. But in Dallas, over 4 yards a carry. This is a very good Cleveland Browns defense, right? Like going into the season as a Cowboys fan, I tempered expectations. I was so pleasantly surprised on the product that Dallas put out yesterday because I know Cleveland's offense wasn't great, but their defense is normally stout. And with 2 rookie starting offensive linemen, including your center, they protected Dak well. So you have to be feeling good if you're a Cowboys fan, and you have to be feeling good if you're a fantasy football manager of any of these Cowboys assets because, not every defense plays as well as the Cleveland Browns.
I'm going to regret saying this. I already regret it, and I haven't said it. I respect what Mike McCarthy did last year by abandoning the run game after week 6, and I respected what he did in week 1, understanding their opponent and getting the ball out quickly and just dominating where he had to. It was a very smart game plan. Mike McCarthy, I may have really said some things about his coaching in the past, but I really think he is very good for what Dallas wants to do. A couple quick hits as we get out here. Look, I want to give the Buccaneers a ton of credit. They deserve it. I also want to understand that Washington is a terrible defense. And we knew going into this game that Evans and Godwin had great matchups, but that's at Baker Mayfield completes 24 of 30 passes, 4 touchdowns. Evans 5 for 61 and a couple touchdowns. Godwin 8 for 83 and a touchdown. They looked unstoppable, but again, they played the Commanders. Will this be a good offense going forward? A great offense, or did they overperform completely and we're not going to get much from them?
I think they're going to be good, right? And Baker's already showing us, hey, like it wasn't Dave Canales, maybe it was a little bit more me. And I also like Liam Cohen more than most. Like I don't know why people are so down. Another Sean McVay guy. But Washington was still Washington. I thought Dan Quinn would have these guys a little bit more prepared. They were a mess. But the one that stands out to me, Chris Godwin. He was somebody I felt like was one of the bigger values at the wide receiver position of fantasy football, going back to his natural slot role. Caught all 8 of his targets, 83 to touchdown, 22.3 PPR points. I do think there's we could be looking at one of those seasons if this keeps up that both Evans and Godwin are top 15 receivers. But like, even if Evans, because he's very big play dependent, even if that ends, Chris Godwin in this slot role, I think he's going to be a league winner because we were drafting him, round 5, round 6?
5th and 6th, yeah.
Yeah.
I do think the Buccaneers are going to be good on offense this year. I do like what Liam Cohen brings in. They'll certainly have weeks where they're not great. When they've an elite defense, the offensive line, the interior line is an issue. But the tackles are good, and so that really helps Baker, helps him step up in the pocket and in the interior collapse. He can kind of do just enough mobility to make it happen. So overall, I'm excited. And then a quick hit out the door. Jaden Daniels gets it done for fantasy, but really, his wide receivers were ghosts. His leading wide receiver was Luke McCaffrey, 3 for 18. Zach Ertz, 3 for 28. McLaurin only had 17 yards. The leading receivers, this was stunning. The mobile quarterback, you don't think they're going to dump to the running backs? The two leading receivers, Eckler 4 for 52 and Brian Robinson 3 for 49. That usually doesn't happen, but Daniels gets it done. 88 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Taking hits again, that's the concern. But when he's out there right now, those numbers make you a quarterback one. And as long as he's healthy and he's going to run like it, I know Tampa Bay is not a good defense, but if he's going to run like that, he's a quarterback one. Anthony?
Yeah, like Jaden Daniels played better than I thought he would. I have questions about a lot of these rookies, and I wish I had more Jaden Daniels, but he's literally going to have to put the offense on his back and carry this team, because if he gets no defensive support, and it doesn't look like he's going to, there's going to be a lot of fantasy points that Jaden Daniels is going to score, whether it's with his legs or his arm. But I do have a concern for guys like Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, it's going to be, the receivers are going to be problematic here because Tampa Bay is not a very good defense. Nope. And yet they were not able to include those receivers. That's a problem. All right, everybody, we'll be on the channel throughout the week. If you're not subscribed to the RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube channel, please consider doing that. Consider hitting the like button as well. On the X, you can catch Anthony at The Real NFL Guru. You can catch me over at Jim Coventry NFL. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us today. Again, we'll be in and out throughout the week. I'll be on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Channel Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday from 8 to 10. Love to catch you there on the weekend as well. Anthony's making a guest spot on the show tonight as well. Look forward to that. Enjoy the Monday night game, and everybody have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.